I could not catch her, and I had never in my life failed to catch anything. I stood over the sprung snare in the black heart of the larch wood, rain dripping off the brim of my hood, and there it was again mocking me, small and white and impossible. A single windflower, laid with care across the loose jaws of the trap I had set with my own hands not 4 hours past. The snare had held a young gray wolf of my pack, one of the outer runners, caught by the foreleg in an iron the poachers used. I had baited the night to draw the phantom to it. I had lain in the wet bracken upwind, still as stone, breathing slow, for I am a hunter before I am a king, and no living thing had ever moved through my wood without my knowing it. And still she had come, and freed the wolf and gone and left me a flower. I crushed it in my fist. The scent of it, cold and green and faintly sweet, clung to my glove for the rest of that night and would not leave. "Sire," Perrin came up out of the dark at my shoulder, my huntsman, the best tracker in 3 kingdoms, and even his voice had gone thin with the shame of it. "There's no trail, not a bent blade of grass. The wolf's gone north on its own 4 legs, healed enough to run. She was here," and then he spread his hands. "Now you see her, now you don't. That's what the Warren folks say of her now, sire, the ghost of Thornville, here and then gone like smoke off a snuffed candle." "She is not smoke," I said. "She breathes, she bleeds. She leaves flowers, which means she has hands, and a thing with hands can be caught." But I did not believe it, even as I said it. 3 months I had hunted her. 3 months of iron and net and patience, of moonless nights lying in the cold, of doubling back and lying in wait and thinking myself cleverer than the dark, and 3 months she had walked through all of it as though I were a boy playing at snares. She fed the sick in the low warren when their own lord let them starve. She left medicine on the doorsteps of the forgotten. She cut the poacher's irons and freed my wolves and left, every single time, one white windflower as if to say, "I was here, and you did not see me, and I am gone." I told myself I hunted her because a phantom moving unseen through my lands was a wound in my sovereignty, because a king who cannot hold his own wood holds nothing. That was true, but it was not the whole truth, and even then, standing in the rain with her flower crushed in my fist, some deeper thing in me knew it. The truth was that she was caring for my people better than I was, and it shamed me down to the root. I did not know her name. I did not know that she slept, that very hour, 300 paces from my own bed, beneath my own roof, with rain on the shutters and windflower petals dried between the pages of a book she could barely read. I know it now. I know all of it now. Let me tell it in its order, the way it happened, so you understand how a man can hunt the finest thing in his own kingdom for a whole autumn, and never once lift his eyes to see it standing at his elbow, pouring his wine. Thornville is a pack of larch and stone, set in a fold of low mountains where the woods burn gold and russet in the autumn, and the rivers run cold off the heights. My hall is Elmgate, high on its gray rock, and below it the packed town, and below that, along the marsh road where the good land gives out, the low warren, the hollow, the poor folk call it, where the runners and the widows and the wolfless born and the old ones without kin scrape their living from thin soil. My father held Thornville before me, and his father before him, and we have always been a hard, plain, proud people, quick to the hunt and slow to the word. That autumn we were hungry. The barley had come in blighted, half the ears black with rot in the wet, and the deer had gone high into the passes early, which the old wives said meant a killing winter. A lean season then, and a frightened one. And a frightened, hungry pack looks to its lord to see whether it will live, and I meant that they should live. I had grain in the great stores of Elmgate, enough, my grain warden swore to me, enough and to spare if it was managed close. His name was Ulrich, and he had kept my stores for 11 years, and I trusted him the way you trust a thing that has never yet broken. He was smooth and gray and tireless, always at the ledgers, always with a soft word and a lower bow, and when I asked him whether the pack would eat through to spring, he looked me in the eye and said, "To the last pup, sire, on my life," and I believed him, because it is easier to believe a man than to walk the length of your own granaries in the cold and count. That was my sin, not cruelty. Cruelty I would have smelled. My sin was that I did not look. I hunted the far wood by night for a phantom and never once counted the sacks in my own cellars by day, and while I chased smoke through the larches, Ulrich skimmed the packs bred into carts that went out the postern by dark and came back full of silver. I did not know that either, not yet. What I knew was that my Warren was dying quietly, and I could not understand why, when the stores were full. I rode down to the hollow myself one gray morning after the flower on the snare, because a king who has been shamed by a ghost goes looking to understand his shame. The Warren was worse than I had let myself believe. Sagging roofs and cold hearths where there should have been smoke, and faces at the doors, thin, wary faces, that did not brighten to see their king ride through but only lowered their eyes, the way you lower your eyes before weather. An old man with a wolf's gray pelt of hair sat on a stone and did not rise for me. A young mother stood in a doorway with a babe on her hip and watched me pass, and there was no plea in her and no hope, only that flat waiting. I stopped my horse before the young mother because I could not ride past that look. "You have bread?" I asked her. "We have bread, sire," she said. And then, because I suppose my face asked the rest of it, she said, quiet, not accusing, just tired, "Someone leaves it, in the night, on the sill, bread and last week a poultice for the little one's chest when the fever was in him." She shifted the babe. "There's always a flower with it, a little white one. We don't know who, we say a blessing for her and we don't ask." Her, even they said her. "Not the king's stores then," I said, "not your lord's charity." She looked at me for a long moment, and there was something in her face then that was almost kindness, almost pity, as if I were the one to be gentled. "No, sire," she said. "Not the king's." I rode back up to Elmgate through the burning larches with that flat word sitting in my chest like a swallowed stone. Not the king's. Somewhere in my kingdom was a woman who did by stealth, alone in the cold, at the risk of the iron and the rope, the thing that I, with a full granary and a crown and 100 wolves at my whistle, was failing to do. And I had set my huntsman to catch her, so that I might punish her for it. I did not yet see how ugly that was. I only felt it, the way you feel a wrongness in the wind before the storm shows. That evening she poured my wine, and I did not look at her. Let me tell you how little I saw her, so you will believe me when I tell you how the ground of me shifted later. Her name was Yenna, and she had scrubbed the pots and carried the platters in the great kitchen of Elmgate for 6 years, since she came up out of the Warren as a half-grown girl with no kin left living. She was one of a dozen such the hall runs on quiet women no one counts, and among them she was, if anything, the one least remarked. She was not plain, though the hall called her plain. She was simply unlooked at, which is a different thing and a crueler one. She kept her head down. She spoke little. She had a way of moving along the wall of a crowded room, so that your eye slid off her the way water slides off oiled wood. The hall folk, in the small, idle way of people who are themselves frightened and cold, made her the butt of their little jokes. When a dish was dropped, it was Yenna who was sent to sweep it, whether her hands had held it or not. When the head steward wanted someone to carry slops out through the sleet, it was Yenna's name he called first. There was a page, a smirking boy called Hob, who liked to jog her elbow as she came round the high table with the ewer, to see if she would spill and be shamed. And one night that autumn he did it, and she did spill. A red arc of wine across the white boards not a hand's breadth from where I sat, and the whole high table laughed. I did not laugh, but neither did I look up. God forgive me. I was turning a windflower over in my mind and did not lift my eyes, and she went down on her knees and mopped it silent, her face perfectly still, and rose, and filled my cup again with a hand that did not shake, and I never saw her at all. I know now that she had walked 11 miles through the wet wood the night before, that she had fed 9 households and freed a wolf from an iron and slept perhaps 2 hours before the cook's bell, that her stillness, when the hall laughed, was not the stillness of a beaten thing, but the stillness of a soldier who has decided your mockery is beneath her notice, because she has been out in the true dark doing true work while you slept warm and laughed at Page's jokes. That there was, caught in the fold of her sleeve as she filled my cup, one small bruised white petal she had not shaken free. I saw none of it. I smelled the wine, and under the wine, very faint, something cold and green and sweet, and I thought, the marsh comes into the hall in this weather, and I let it go. Now you see her, now you don't. She had made an art of it before ever I began to hunt her. She had made an art of it in my own hall, at my own table for 6 years. And I, the finest hunter in 3 kingdoms, had never once caught her being seen. I did not sleep well that autumn. When the hall was dark and the fires banked, I would take my bow and go out into the wood alone, without Perrin, without the dogs, and lie in wait for the ghost in a new place each night, because I could not abide being outmatched, and because, I can say it now, because there was something in the chase that had begun to warm me, some strange bright thread of gladness under the anger. She was so good. Whatever else, she was so good at it. I had begun, against all sense, to look forward to the flower. And while I lay in the bracken watching the empty places she had already left, she was somewhere else entirely, doing the work. I know her nights now the way I know my own. I have made her tell me all of it over years by our own fire, laughing, most of it, for she found it funnier than I ever could, that the king had lain in the cold at the north snare all night while she fed the whole east marsh and never came within a mile of him. She would wait until the kitchen was banked and the other women snoring, and then she would go out the little herb-yard door whose latch she had long ago worked loose and oiled, and over the low wall where the ivy hid a foothold, and down the goat track that no grown man would think a body could take, into the wood. She wore gray and moss green, and she moved low, and she had learned the wind the way I had learned it without ever being taught, out of pure need and pure attention. She carried what she had saved and what she had lifted, and here is the heart of it, the thing I did not yet know. She lifted it from Ulrich. For Yenna, who was invisible, saw everything. That is the way of the unlooked at. They see. Standing at the wall of the room where no eye rested on her, she had watched the grain warden for years. She had carried slop past the postern and seen the carts go out full by dark, and the coin come in. She had counted, in her silent way, the sacks that left the king's cellars for no honest granary. She knew, long before I did, that Ulrich was starving Thornville into his own strong-box, and she, a kitchen maid with no power on this earth to accuse a lord and be believed, had done the only thing a powerless soul could do. She had begun, quietly, to steal it back, to carry the pack's own stolen bread down through the dark to the pack's own hungry mouths. And over each gift she laid a flower, because she told me this once, and I have never forgotten it, if I only left bread by, they would think themselves beggars. A flower says, someone saw you and thought you worth a gift. Bread keeps them alive. The flower reminds them they are worth keeping alive. She used the flower to say the very thing I, their king, had failed to say. That was the woman I was hunting. That was the phantom I meant to put in irons. I laid a new plan. I would stop chasing her through the far wood and instead watch the need, for a phantom who feeds the hungry must go where the hunger is. I had Perrin let it be known quietly that a certain snare had taken a wolf on the east marsh and would be checked at dawn, bait for a heart that could not leave a wolf in an iron. And I told Perrin, not you, not the dogs. This one is mine. I will take her myself. And when you have her, sire, Perrin asked. There was a strange reluctance in him. My huntsman, who had never in his life felt sorry for a quarry, did not want to catch this one either. The Warren loves her. If you hang the ghost of Thornville. I will not hang her, I said too fast, and heard how fast it was and did not know what to make of it. I will look on her face, that is all. I will know who she is. I will know who she is. I said it as a hunter says it, meaning, I will end the mystery, I will close my hand on the smoke. I did not know I was speaking a truer thing than I meant. I did not know that when I looked on her face at last, the man who said those words would be gone, and a different man would be standing in his boots. The storm came 3 nights later, and I have thanked God for that storm every day of my life since. It came down off the passes at dusk, A great gray wall of it, rain driven sidewise and the larches roaring, and any sane man would have kept his hall. I put on my darkest cloak and went out into it, because I had let it be known that the East Marsh snare would be checked at dawn, and I knew in my hunter's bones that no storm would keep the ghost from a wolf in an iron. If anything, the storm would draw her, cover, sound to hide her steps. She would think herself safest tonight. So would I. That is the way of two hunters who do not yet know they are one another's mate. They think alike, and it brings them, at last, to the same dark place at the same dark hour. I lay in the flooded bracken above the east snare with the rain filling my hood and the whole wood screaming around me, and I waited, and near the black middle of the night she came. I did not hear her. In that storm no living ear could have heard her, and she came the way she always came, low and gray and part of the wood, but I saw her, a slip of deeper darkness against the pale birch trunks, moving down toward the pinned wolf. And everything in me went to that stillness that comes upon me before the strike, the old cold clean patience, and I watched her kneel by the snarling frightened wolf and speak to it. I could see her lips move, though I heard nothing, and I watched the wolf, an iron-caught wolf, wild with pain and fear, go quiet under her voice, quiet enough for her to work the jaws with a little bar of iron she carried, and free its leg and lay her hand flat on its wet side once, a benediction, before it bolted into the dark. And then she rose and reached into her breast and drew out, even in that storm, even soaked and streaming, one small white windflower to lay across the sprung iron. I moved. I am fast. I have run down deer in the open. I came out of the bracken and across the ground between us before she had straightened, and I think she felt me the way a hunted thing feels the fall of a shadow, for she was already turning, already flowing sideways toward the trees. But the ground there was clay and running with the storm, and her foot went, just a hand's breadth, just for an instant, and in that instant I had her. I got an arm about her and we went down together into the mud and the roaring dark, and she fought me, not with the panic of a caught coney, but with the hard economical desperation of someone who has decided the one thing that must not happen is being seen, an elbow, a twist, a heel. She was strong, far stronger than her size and quick as water, and for a moment I truly did not know if I could hold her. But I am a great deal larger, and I had her arms at last, and I pinned her under me in the mud with the rain hammering down between us, and with my free hand I dragged back her sodden hood. Lightning walked the sky just then. It lit the whole wood white. And I looked down into the face of the phantom I had hunted through 3 months and a storm, and it was the maid. It was the woman who poured my wine. It was the plain, unlooked-at, wine-spilling kitchen girl the whole hall laughed at Yenna, and she looked up at me out of the mud with her wet hair plastered to her white face and her chest heaving, and she was not the least bit plain. She had never been plain. She was the bravest and most beautiful thing I had ever held down in the wreck of a storm, and I could not breathe. I want to tell you it was the bond, and it was, but not the way the old tales tell it. There was no gold light. My mark did not wake and burn. My wolf did not howl and rise. It was quieter and far worse than that, and I have never found the true words for it, though I have tried 1,000 times. It was that the hunter in me lay down. All my life I have been a hunting thing, restless, tireless, never at ease, always with some part of me out in the dark tracking the next quarry, the way a wolf can never quite stop listening. I had hunted deer and men, and that autumn a ghost. I had never once in my life been still. And in the instant the lightning showed me her face. In the instant I understood that the finest, bravest, most tireless heart in all my kingdom had been standing at my elbow for 6 years pouring my wine, and I had been too high and blind to see it, and had set out to punish her for being better than her king. In that instant the whole endless, restless engine of me went quiet, the way a wood goes quiet when the true master of it finally lies down to sleep. I had chased her across my own kingdom for 3 months, and the moment I knew her face, the chase in me ended. It has never woken since. I have not needed to hunt anything from that night to this. I found the one thing I had been hunting all my life without knowing its name, and it was pinned in the mud beneath me, glaring up at me, unafraid. "Well," she said, rain running off her chin, "not begging, never once begging. Now you see me." I got off her. I let go of her arms. I sat back in the streaming mud like a man who had been struck, and I let the ghost of Thornville go free. She did not run. That is the thing I did not expect and have never forgotten. She got up onto one knee, ready to bolt, and then she looked at my face, at whatever was in my face, and she did not run. She stayed there in the storm on one knee, watching me the way you watch a beast you cannot read, and after a long moment she reached down into the mud where the windflower had fallen and picked it up, and she looked at it, and she looked at me, and she held it out. I took it from her hand. My fingers were shaking, a king's fingers shaking over a broken flower. "Why?" was all I could say. The rain nearly took the word. "Why do you?" "Because someone has to," she said, simply, as though it were the plainest thing in the world, as though she could not understand a king who did not already know it. "Because they're yours and they're starving and nobody with a name will lift a hand. So it has to be somebody without one." And then, with a flash of something fierce and bright under the exhaustion, a spark of the mischief I would come to love more than my own life, "You've a full granary up on that rock, sire, and your people are eating grass. Did you never wonder why?" I had wondered. God help me, I had wondered, and I had not looked. "Come out of the rain," I said, hoarse. "Come up to the hall. You have my word you are not caught. You have my word on my crown. But come out of the rain and tell me what you know, because I think," and I heard my own voice break on it, "I think I have been a fool in my own house, and you are the only one brave enough to say so." She studied me a long, long moment in the streaming dark. Then the ghost of Thornville, who trusted no one, who had survived 6 years of my blindness by never once being caught, did the bravest thing I ever saw her do. She rose, and she came out of the rain, and she followed her king up out of the wood to the hall she had been robbing to feed his people. And she told me everything. She told me by the low fire in my own chamber, wrapped in a dry cloak of mine that swallowed her whole, her hair drying in dark curls, her voice quiet and level and merciless with fact. She told me of the carts that went out the postern by dark, and how many and how often. She told me the nights. She told me the tally she had kept in her head. The maid could not read a ledger, but she could count, and she had counted for years of how much grain left Elmgate for no honest use. She told me of the silver, and of the man in the river town who bought Thornville's stolen bread and sold it back to other hungry packs at a hard price. She named it all so plainly, so exactly, that no man who heard it could have doubted her. And every fact she laid down was another stone off my chest and another coal on my shame. For it all pointed one way. It pointed at Ulrich, at the smooth gray warden who looked me in the eye and swore my pack would eat to the last pup on his life, while he carried that pup's bread out the back gate by night and pocketed the price of its life. The theft she had confessed to me, the theft I had hunted her 3 months to punish, was this. She had been stealing the pack's own stolen bread back, out of the very carts and cellars Ulrich skimmed, and carrying it down to the mouths it had been robbed from. She had stolen from a thief to feed the robbed, and she had wrapped each loaf in the dignity of a flower, so that a starving family might feel, for one moment, not like beggars but like people someone had seen and thought worth a gift. "Why not come to me?" I asked her, and even as I said it I knew the foolishness of it. "Why not lay it before your king?" She looked at me over the fire, and there was no cruelty in it, but there was no mercy for my pride either. "And who would you have believed, sire?" she said. "Your warden of 11 years with his ledgers and his bows, or a kitchen maid the whole hall laughs at, who cannot read the very books he'd wave in your face? I did lay it before my king." The mischief again, gentle now and sad. "I laid it on 9 doorsteps a night. It was the only court that would hear me." I had no answer. There was no answer. She was entirely right, and I was entirely shamed, and between us on the hearthstone lay a single bruised white windflower, and I understood that I loved her, and that I had done nothing yet to deserve to say so. So I did not say so. Not that night. A man who has just discovered that the woman before him is braver and truer and wiser than he has been does not open his mouth and demand her love as though it were owed. I had claimed nothing from her, and would claim nothing until I had earned the right. Instead, I said the only worthy thing there was to say. "Then let me be your court," I said. "Not the doorsteps, me. Bring me your count, all of it, and I will open the cellars myself at dawn and walk them and weigh them and see with my own eyes what I was too proud to see. And if it is as you say," I looked at the flower, "then the theft in Thornville was never yours, and the man who will answer for it is the one I trusted instead of my own people. That I swear to you, Yenna." It was the first time I had ever said her name. I had poured 6 years of wine into me by her hand and never once said her name. When I said it, she went very still, and something moved across her face that she quickly put away, and she looked down at her hands and she said, "Lo, you know my name." "I know it now," I said. "I will not forget it again." I walked the cellars at dawn with a torch and a tally stick and no warden at my elbow, and I counted my own granaries for the first time in 11 years, and Yenna's count was true to the last sack. Where Ulrich's ledger swore a store, I found bare stone. Where it swore 100 sacks, I found 40. The granary that was meant to feed my pack to spring would not have fed them to the turn of the year. I stood among the empty bays with the torchlight shaking on the walls, and I felt the cold of it go all the way through me. Not the cold of the theft, though that was cold enough, but the cold of my own blindness. She had known this for years. A maid with no name and no letters had held the truth of it in her head and carried it down to the hungry on her own 2 feet, alone in the dark, while I hunted her for it. I sent for the man in the river town quietly and had him watched, and within 2 days I had the buyer's own tallies and the names of the carters and the reckoning of the silver, and it all closed around Ulrich like a snare of his own iron. I could have taken him that hour. I wanted to. My wolf wanted his throat. But Yenna, when I told her, shook her head. "Take him quiet, and the hall will whisper the king protected his own great man and hushed it," she said. "Take him quiet, and every family in the warren goes on believing no one with a name will ever lift a hand for them. No, sire, if you mean to be their court," and here the mischief came up in her eyes, bright and dangerous, "then hold the court. In the open, let him stand up before the whole pack and say his lie one last time, and then let the truth come in through the door." She was, as she was in all things, entirely right, and she did not yet know, for I had not told her, because I did not yet fully know it myself, that the truth I meant to bring in through that door was not only Ulrich's theft, but her. Ulrich moved first. He was smooth, but he was not stupid, and a smooth, stupid man does not skim a king's granary for 11 years. He had marked, no doubt, that his king had grown strange, walking the cellars, sending quiet riders to the river town, keeping a certain kitchen maid oddly near. He knew the ground was shifting under him. So he did what a cornered, clever man does. He found someone else to throw to the wolves, and he threw first, and he threw loud in the one place where a loud lie can drown a quiet truth, the great hall, at the high feast, before the whole pack. It was the feast of the turning, when all of Thornville that can crowd into Elmgate comes up to the hall, the pack lords and the town folk and even the warren, brought up out of the hollow to eat one honest meal at their king's boards. I had ordered that feast myself, and ordered the warren brought to it, because I meant that night to begin setting right what I had let go wrong. Ulrich, I think, guessed that, and so he struck before I could. He rose in the middle of the meal in his warden's gray, and he lifted his voice over the hall, and it rang off the old stones, grave and sorrowful and false. "Sire, before all your people it grieves me, but I must speak." The hall stilled. A warden of 11 years, rising with grief on his face, will still any hall. "There is a thief in Thornville. You know it, sire. All the pack knows it. Through this whole hard autumn, while good folk starved, someone has been creeping in the dark, robbing the king's own stores, the very bread that should have fed us all through winter, and cloaking her thievery in a pretty flower to make the simple love her for it. The ghost, they call her. He let the word ring. I have found her out, sire. I have kept it close till I was sure, for I would not accuse falsely, but I am sure now. The ghost who has robbed you blind, who has stolen the winter out of your granaries. And he turned, and he lifted one gray hand, and he pointed down the hall to where the kitchen women stood along the wall in their serving gray, and his finger fell on her. Is your own kitchen maid, Yenna of the Warren, that one, the plain one? Take her, sire, and hang the ghost of Thornville before your pack, and let winter fear you again. The hall roared. You have never heard such a sound, the shock of it, the turning of 1,000 heads, the pack lords surging up, the Warren folk crying out. And through all of it every eye in that great room, for the first time in 6 years, went to Yenna, the unlooked-at maid, the one whose elbow the pages jogged, whose spills the high table laughed at, whom no one had ever once truly seen. Now they saw her. Now they all saw her, and the seeing was a spear pointed at her heart, and Hob the page, who had jogged her elbow, went white as ash along the wall. And she did not flinch. She stepped out from the line of serving women, alone, into the open floor of the hall, into the full weight of every stare, and she stood there in her gray with her chin level and her hands loose at her sides, and she was not afraid. I have thought since that she had rehearsed this moment 10,000 times in her heart on 10,000 dark roads, the moment of being caught, of being named, of standing before the pack to answer for it, and having rehearsed it so long, she found, when it came, that it held no terror for her. She had already decided, long ago in the cold, that if this bread cost her her life, it was a fair price, and a family in the hollow would eat. She had made her peace with the rope before ever she laid the first flower. So when the whole pack turned on her, the ghost of Thornville did not beg and did not weep and did not run. She lifted her head and she looked, not at Ulrich and not at the roaring hall, but at me, her king, on his high seat, and she waited to see what I would do. And I stood up. The hall fell silent as a stopped heart. When the Alpha King of Thornville stands in his own hall, the world holds its breath. Warden, I said, and my voice went out over all of them, cold and level, you have accused this woman of stealing the winter out of my granaries. I came down from the high seat, step by step, and the pack fell back before me. Of robbing the king's stores, of leaving my pack to starve for her own gain. That is your charge. It is, sire, said Ulrich, and God pity him, he thought he had won. He thought the grief on his face and the fear in the hall had carried it. He pressed on, warming to it. On my life, sire, on my 11 years of faithful service. Weigh your cellars if you doubt me, you'll find them robbed to the stone, and there stands the thief that robbed them. I have weighed my cellars, I said. Something in the way I said it stopped him. A little uncertainty crossed his smooth gray face, the first crack. I weighed them 3 days ago, Ulrich, I said, with my own torch in my own hands and no warden at my elbow to hold the tally. I turned slowly, so the whole hall could see me, so the whole hall could hear, and I found them robbed to the stone, just as you say. The winter is gone out of my granaries, that much is true. The hall breathed, Ulrich almost smiled. But not by her, I said. I let it land. I let it fall into that silent hall like a stone into a still pool, and I watched the smile die on my warden's face. For 3 days I have had the river town watched, I said, and now my voice began to rise, and my wolf rose in it, and the hall shrank before it. I have the carters' names. I have the buyer's own tallies in his own hand. I have the reckoning of every sack that went out the Elmgate postern by dark this autumn, and the silver that came back for it, and the count of it matches to the grain, the count that this woman. I flung out my hand toward Yenna, and now every eye followed it, not in accusation but in dawning, terrible wonder. This woman, this maid, who cannot read a letter of your ledgers, Ulrich, carried in her head for years, because she stood at the wall of every room you robbed and she saw you, when I was too proud to look. Ulrich's mouth opened. Nothing came out of it. The winter did not go into her hands, I said. It went into yours, and out the postern, and into your strong box. You starved my pack for silver, Warden, and you swore to my face on your life that they would eat to the last pup, while you carried that pup's bread out the back gate in the dark. I was close to him now. I could smell the fear coming off him. And when you saw the ground shift under you, you looked about for someone with no name and no letters and no lord to speak for her, and you thought, there, I will hang the theft on her, and no one will trouble to doubt me. My voice dropped, and dropping filled the whole hall. You were nearly right, that is the shame of it. You were nearly right, because for 6 years not one of us in this hall, and I turned, and I took in all of them, the pack lords and the town folk and the pages and myself most of all, not one of us ever once looked at her. You counted on our blindness, Ulrich. It was your surest wager, and it very nearly held. I turned my back on him. The deepest contempt a king can show a man is to turn his back, and I gave the order over my shoulder, flat and final. Take the warden. Hold him for the reckoning. He will answer to the pack for every empty sack to the grain. And they took him, and he was babbling now, the smoothness all gone, but no one in that hall was listening to Ulrich of the Grey any more. They were looking at Yenna. I walked back across the open floor to where she stood, and the whole pack watched me come, and she watched me come, and I stopped before her close, and for a moment neither of us spoke. She had not moved through all of it. She stood as she had stood when the spear of every eye first found her, level, unafraid, her chin up. But I was near enough now to see what the hall could not, that her hands, loose at her sides, had been holding so still for so long that it cost her. That under the fierce calm she was a woman who had just heard, for the first time in her life, someone with a name stand up before the whole world and speak for her. She had fed 100 families, believing no lord would ever lift a hand, and a lord had just lifted his whole arm. You said, she managed low so only I could hear, that you would be my court. I said I would be your court, I answered just as low, but I find I do not want to be your court, Yenna. A court weighs a case and gives a verdict and is done. I do not want to be done with you. My throat closed on it. 6 years of not looking, and now I could not look away, and I did not want ever again to look away. I have hunted you the length of my kingdom. I told my huntsman I only wished to know your face. I know it now. And knowing it, I find the hunting thing in me has laid down and gone quiet for the first time in all my life, and I do not want it to wake again, and it will not, so long as you are in the world where I can find you. Her eyes searched my face, those steady eyes that had counted my warden's theft in the dark, that had learned the whole wood by need, that missed nothing, and for once, for the first time, they were uncertain. Sire, she said, I am a maid of the warren, I cannot read. I have stolen from your stores. The whole hall, the smallest catch in her voice, the whole hall laughs at me. The whole hall, I said, and I lifted my voice again, so that it was not a thing between us but a thing before all of them, because she had never once had her worth said in the open, and I would say it in the open now. The whole hall has been laughing at the finest heart in Thornville for 6 years, and never knew it. The whole hall jogged the elbow of the one soul among us with the courage to do by night what her king failed to do by day. I looked round at them, at Hob, Ashpale, at the pack lords silent, at the warren folk near the doors who had begun softly to weep, for they knew now whose flower had been on their sills. Every one of you who ate this autumn, every child in the hollow who did not starve, ate because this woman walked 11 miles in the wet dark and stole your own bread back from the man who robbed you and laid a flower over it so you would not feel like beggars. You called her the ghost. You feared her. You should have knelt to her. I should have knelt to her. And I did. I, the Alpha King of Thornville, who had never knelt to anything but the moon, went down before my own pack onto one knee before a kitchen maid in serving gray, and I heard the hall gasp, and I did not care, because there is no shame in a proud man kneeling once at the right time to the right soul. I took her chapped, work-hard hand in both of mine, the hand that had freed my wolves and fed my people and poured my wine unseen for 6 years, and I looked up at her, and I said it in front of all of them, so it could never be unsaid. I will not command this, and I will not claim it. You have spent your life having things demanded of you, and I will not be one more voice demanding. So I ask it freely, and you may freely say me no. And if you do, I will honor it and open the stores and set the warren right regardless, for that is owed and is not conditioned on your answer. I drew a breath. But I would have you at my side, Yenna. Not as a reward for what you did, you are not a thing to be paid, but because you are, past any doubt I have ever had of anything, the truest heart in my kingdom, and I have been half a king my whole life for want of the other half. And I did not know it until a storm threw me down in the mud beside you. Stand beside me. Be my Luna. Be the eyes I was too proud to use. I am asking. The hall was so silent I could hear the fire. She looked down at me for a long moment, the maid, the ghost, the phantom no one could catch. And then that mischief I loved came up in her eyes one last time, bright through the shine of tears, and she said, so soft only for me, but I have never in my life heard anything ring so loud. Now you see me. Now I see you, I said. And I will not stop. And she closed her hand around mine, and that was her yes. And the hall of Thornville broke like a river coming over a dam, the Warren folk crying out and lifting their hands, and even the pack lords rising, and Hob the page weeping openly by the wall, and I stood, and I put my own cloak about her shoulders before all of them, the gray serving cloak covered over now by the king's own fur, and she stood in the middle of that roaring hall, no longer unlooked at, no longer the one the eye slid off, but the one every eye in Thornville would learn to turn to for the rest of their lives. We did not marry in snow, nor in a great cold rite, nor with any stamp of gold. We married in the turning of the year, in the russet larchlight in the open, with the warren brought up to the hall to eat at the king's boards, truly to eat this time. For I had thrown open the granaries that first gray dawn after the feast and set my own hands to the doling of it, and no soul in Thornville went hungry into that winter, nor ever has since. Ulrich answered to the pack, sack by empty sack, and I will not tell you his end here, for this is not his story and never was. He was only the small gray shadow that made the light needful, and the light is what matters. What matters is that I abolished the office of grain warden entirely, and put the keeping of the stores into the hands of the warren itself, into the hands of the very folk who had starved. For I had learned, from a woman in the mud, that you do not set the well-fed to guard the bread of the hungry. You set the hungry to guard their own. And I learned to look. That was her true gift to me, greater than the count she carried or the flower she left. She taught a proud, blind, hunting king to lower his eyes from the far dark wood and look at what stood at his own elbow. I walk my hall differently now. I walk my warren differently. I see the ones the eye slides off, because I know now that the eye slides off precisely the souls most worth the seeing, and that a king who does not look at the wall of his own room does not know his own kingdom at all. They still leave windflowers in Thornville, but not in the dark now, and not in secret. Every autumn at the turning, the pack goes down to the low warren and scatters white windflowers the length of the marsh road, a whole road of them, pale in the russet light, in honor of the years when someone left them one at a time by stealth, so that no family here would ever again feel like beggars. My Luna walks that road each year at the head of the pack, and the children run ahead of her strewing the flowers, and the old ones who once found her gifts on their cold sills come out to kiss her hands, and she lets them, though she has never once been easy with being thanked. She would still rather do the good by night and vanish. It is only for my sake, I think, that she has learned to be seen. For here is the last of it, the small thing, the true thing that I keep for myself. She spent her whole life slipping through the dark unseen. Now you see her, now you don't. That was her art, her armor, her only safety, learned young and hard. Never be caught, never be known, always be gone. It took her a long while, even after the vow, even after the crown, to unlearn it. In the first months she would still start awake before dawn, reaching for a gray cloak, halfway to the herb yard door out of 6 years' habit, before she remembered there was no need, that the bread went out openly now in daylight by the pack's own hands, and no one in Thornville was hungry for her to feed. So I began to keep a lantern lit in the east window every night. She asked me once why, and I told her the truth. Not to catch her. I will never hunt her again. The hunting thing in me laid down in a storm and has never once stirred. I keep it lit so that the woman who spent her whole life coming home through the dark unseen, afraid of being caught, need never come home in the dark again. So that if some night the old habit takes her out into the wood after some wounded thing, and it does still, it always will, she is what she is, and I would not change one hair of it. There will be one warm light burning above the black trees to bring her back to me. A light that says the thing her flowers always said to others, said now to her, every night of her life. Someone sees you and thinks you worth a gift. Someone kept the light. Come home. Stay. They used to say the ghost of Thornville could never be caught. They were right, she never was caught, not truly. I held her in the mud one storm night, but you cannot catch a thing like her. The wood itself could not hold her, nor the iron, nor the rope, nor all my hunter's cunning. She was never caught. She was chosen. And she chose at the last to stay. And every night the lantern burns in the east window, and every night she comes home to it. And I, who hunted the whole wide dark for the finest thing in my kingdom, need never hunt again.